we don't necessarily call these guys preseason risers and fallers. They're guys more that are polarizing preseason players. So you see these fancy arrows that we have here, the green arrows pointing up, the red ones pointing down. You're making a face.
Yeah.
Some change?
Well, no, these are definitely my polarizing players. Yeah. Yeah, I was the high guy on J.K. Dobbins, I think, to start things out. And I think Dave was probably the most cautious. And I'm still very excited about what Dobbins could do once he gets to 100%. But right now, I don't know if he's going to be there week 1.
All right, so let's start right there. So week 1, matchup against the Jets. You never want to say a team could beat a team without a player.
Yeah.
I'm sure they'd like to have J.K. Dobbins on the field. But they probably beat the Jets without J.K. Dobbins on the field. So you think they're going to rush Dobbins back out there? And if he's not ready to go, is it Mike Davis? Is it Kenyon Drake? What's the approach? Because we know Gus Edwards is out for the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, when Dave sent the email and said we're not ranking Dobbins to start the week, and so I just basically split the touches down the middle because I don't have any idea. I think Kenyon Drake's better than Mike Davis at this stage of their careers, but Mike Davis has been there for the entire camp. And so what we saw last year in a situation similar to this was that Latavius Murray saw the majority of the touches. Devontae Freeman eventually overtook him. I do wonder, though, that if it's possible that Drake could be better even on fewer touches than Davis.
It would be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this whole backfield looks. And so, Dave, for those people that are drafting J.K. Dobbins, again, today through the end of the week, what round should they be looking to take him?
Round 6 is really the best time to take him because there's so much uncertainty, not just about week 1. We're not even getting the signal from the Ravens that, don't worry, he'll be fine for the majority of the year. We're just making sure he ramps up and is 100%. There seems to just be no smoke signals coming out of Baltimore that he's close to being ready to go. They kept him, or they took him off the PUP list, so that makes you think that he'll be playing before week 4. But we can't say for sure. We don't know for sure because the Ravens aren't telling us for sure. And we just got a video on social media where he's doing a drill with a tackling dummy, and then he's limping right after. It's not what you want to take with a top 50 pick on draft day. And the worst part is that if you take J.K. Dobbins, are you sure that getting Kenyon Drake in the late rounds is the right move? Or is it Mike Davis? I think Heath's point is legit. Davis has been there all offseason. He knows what they're asking him to do. But he could still lose touches to Drake because Drake seems to be the better and slightly more explosive talent. So it's a whole hornet's nest I think fantasy managers should prefer to avoid. But there is going to come a point in the draft where you see Dobbins is there and you know what his upside is, and you got to take the chance on it. I think that's round 6.
Yeah, I think just with the video that you referenced, because a lot of people got, all bothered about it. He took one step before the video cuts off, and, it clearly is something, it's bothering him. But is it bothering him because of what was in the drill, or is there really something actually wrong with his knee? So I don't want to make too much about the video after, like if we saw him walk for like 15 feet and he's limping the entire time, it just feels like a lot of people making a little too much about that video. So I'm hoping this is another thing like I brought up with Cam Akers. We look back on this and go, why didn't I take J.K. Dobbins sooner? Because from week 4 on, from week 3 on, hopefully from week 1 on, he's the J.K. Dobbins we were hoping to see. We know A.J. Dillon's in a good spot, and I know you're very excited about him. I am as well. I think he could be a breakout candidate this year. But we get the question all the time. How can A.J. Dillon be a breakout candidate if Aaron Jones is there?
Yeah, that's been kind of my question. At the beginning of the offseason, I had Dillon around RB26. He's up to RB18, even in full PPR now. Part of it is the way that Aaron Rodgers and the coaching staff have talked about using both of these backs in the passing game. Part of it is the fact that Christian Watson didn't really step up and do what I was hoping he would do. I know Romeo Doubs had a great training camp. I'm less convinced that he could be a big target earner. So it looks to me like it could be Allen Lazard, Aaron Jones, and A.J. Dillon as really the focal point of this entire offense. The way that it would work is if Aaron Jones is getting 6 targets a game, they're both getting 12 to 15 carries a game, and Dillon catches a couple of passes as well.
Do you feel like, Dave, you can start A.J. Dillon in week 1 against the Vikings, or you want to see how this all works first before you trust Dillon?
You can start him week 1 against the Vikings. I would call him a middle to low end number 2 fantasy running back, but he's got the potential to score every week. Doesn't matter who they play. He's a powerhouse running back who can cash in at the goal line against any defense in the National Football League. So with that type of potential from week to week, he qualifies as a top 24 running back. And that's why you drafted him as a top 24 running back. But does he have the upside to be a top 15 running back? I don't think that's the case as long as Aaron Jones is on.
Unless he's just, leading the team in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and maybe, like you said, Heath, getting 3 to 4 catches a game. Last year when he had 4 catches a game, he was an absolute monster. Most of that came when Aaron Jones missed time. But this receiving core could lead to him catching a lot of passes. So there's a lot to love about A.J. Dillon. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been somebody that's been polarizing for every fantasy player and certainly every fantasy analyst as well, because last year he was an unbelievable rock star to close the season. But they add Jamison Williams, they bring in DJ Chark, and we know a lot of that production came last year without TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift on the field. Can Amon-Ra St. Brown live up to where last season ended? Is he going to fade a little bit? What's changed your mind for him?
I think he will fade a little bit. I don't think he'll fade as much as I did at the beginning of the training camp. The fact that Jamison Williams is not just going to miss the first 4 weeks, but there's a lot of talk that he may not come back until after their week 7 bye. And not just that, but like this whole TJ Hawkinson versus Amon-Ra St. Brown, and even DeAndre Swift versus him to a certain extent, because Swift was hurt for a big period of that as well. It sounds to me like Amon-Ra St. Brown is the one guy who is going to definitely have a big role in this offense, and we'll see if Hawkinson does in terms of the passing game or not. Also, St. Brown is one of those guys who ranks a lot higher for me week 1 than he did for the full season. And I do think there is some value in getting off to a hot start. He might be a top 20 wide receiver until Jamison Williams gets there, and then we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see. And so, Dave, again, St. Brown, people panicked a little bit because of how things went for this offseason when they added these bodies and getting these guys healthy. Again, this is going to be somebody that's talented enough that just overcomes that, and this is Jared Goff's guy.
I don't know if he's talented enough to overcome it. He just needs the volume. And I'm not sure that he's going to get the same type of volume that he had to end last year. His target share was like the third of the passes in Detroit. That doesn't happen. Running receivers, running backs, tight ends, they don't get that type of target share on a week-to-week basis. Nobody. But he could still command 24, 25% of the target share. And so maybe we're underrating him just a little bit in full PPR, but it's those non-PPR leagues where I'm really nervous about him because I don't think he's going to have a huge yards per catch average. I don't think he's going to make many explosive plays. I'm very worried about him this week against Philadelphia. That's a great defense. I think Jared Goff's going to have a hard time throwing. That means that all you can really count on with St. Brown, and it might be this way for every game, is high catch totals. I think he can catch 6 passes this week. That puts him in play as a borderline number 2 flex wide receiver.
We saw last year, week 1, and it was the running backs, but we saw very good defense taking on the 49ers. They were in this hectic, frantic comeback mode. Jared Goff dumping the ball off. We could see that for Swift. We could see that for St. Brown in this matchup as well, even though it is going to be tough against the Eagles. Garrett Wilson was one of your favorite prospects coming in, and I'm sure he's still one of your favorite prospects long-term. But for 2022, is he worth drafting at this point?
Oh, I'm definitely still drafting him. He's part of that double-digit round to Jahan Dotson, all the rookie wide receivers. That's what I want to draft in the double-digit rounds. But I actually had Garrett Wilson ahead of Elijah Moore at the beginning of camp. I mean, he was drafted higher with Moore already on the roster, and so that's kind of the way I was looking at it. I really hated the fact that Zach Wilson got hurt and Garrett Wilson missed so much time with him. And even more so, it seems like Corey Davis is ahead of Garrett Wilson right now in terms of week 1. I don't think that will last very long. I still want to draft Wilson in round 11, round 12, but I'm off him in the single-digit rounds, which is where I had him at the start of camp.
Is there a quarterback that matters more for him? Is it Joe Flacco because of how he throws the ball to his wide receivers more so than Zach Wilson, or is it Wilson because let's see these guys develop together?
I think, for week 1, Joe Flacco is better for everybody. If you told me there was a chance Joe Flacco played all year, I think that'd be better for everybody. But since Zach Wilson's going to come back, I think they need to get Zach Wilson on the field as soon as possible.
All right, Dallas Goedert, somebody you're very excited about, and I think the conversation not necessarily is can Goddard have a breakout campaign, because I think we all see sort of the path. They throw the ball more. He's one of the top 3 targets, understandably so. It's more about, does Dallas Goedert outperform the couple of guys that are going ahead of him, specifically Dalton Schultz and George Kittle? How do you rank those guys, and how much of a separation is there?
I've got it Goddard, Kittle, Schultz, both for week 1 and for the full season. I do think he has higher touchdown potential than Kittle for sure, maybe than Schultz. And I just have decided I don't believe A.J. Brown's going to impact his targets. That'll happen to the other wide receivers. I think Goddard and A.J. Brown are the top 2 options in this offense.
Now, Dave, we don't see Goddard go ahead of Kittle for sure, and in most cases not ahead of Schultz. Just rank these guys for me. Just give me the names.
It's Schultz, Goddard, Kittle.
Schultz, Goddard, Kittle for you. I still take Kittle first. I just don't like where Kittle goes. He goes in the 4th round of drafts. I think that's too soon, so I'd much rather wait for Schultz or Goddard. But I do think if Kittle hits, we've seen it. His points per game, much better, I think, than where these 2 guys will finish. But I think all 3 of these guys sort of belong in the same group. We typically put Kittle in the other group with Waller and the 3 guys in front of him. I think Kittle closer to these guys. Hopefully we don't get stuck in the same trap of these middle of the top 10 tight ends that always seem to fail for us. I just don't think that's going to be the case with guys like Goddard, with Kittle, and with Schultz, and hopefully they could all compete to be top 5, if not top 3 tight ends this year. All right, you have another tight end that's changed your mind, and that's Evan Engram. Why?
Because I thought at the beginning of camp he might be fighting with Dan Arnold to be the number 1 tight end for Jacksonville. Whoever is the number 1 tight end for Jacksonville is going to get a ton of opportunities. He might drop them in the regular season, but he's at least going to get them the first few weeks. There is a chance for Evan Engram to be a top 10, top 8 tight end if he can just somehow remember how to catch the football.
I wish it was Dan Arnold. I mean,
I do too.
He was great for them last year. He really was, and we'll find out, if he can sort of just hang in the weeds and watch Evan Engram fall all over himself and fail, and then, Dan Arnold's back there. I'm just curious to see if the typical Doug Peterson offense carries over, or because of Christian Kirk, because of Travis Etienne, because of Marvin and Zay Jones, that those guys sort of keep the tight end off the field a little bit for what Doug Peterson had. It's a little different when you're talking about Evan Engram versus Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert.
Right.
The talent level. I don't want to say talent level is not the same, because Evan Engram was, certainly from a pedigree standpoint, had a chance to make a lot of plays. But from a talent standpoint, there's a big gap between Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert.